Good evening, everybody. We are live with Matthew Marsden, as promised.
How you doing,
Some of
mate?
you may have, thank you, we're doing phenomenal. Some of you may have seen Matthew on Coronation Street. Some of you may have seen him in Black Hawk Down. Some of you may have seen him in Rambo even. And Matthew went from the UK, wasn't handed all this on a silver platter, worked his ass off in multiple jobs. He's a very grounded person. He's got an appreciation of life. And he got into the mix with these people, and he realized when he pulled his son back from the agents that there were dangers ahead. He realized when they were trying to find out if he was gay, there were dangers ahead. He realized when he heard about proper big names that he can't mention getting compromised to get career advancements, and these people being traumatized by what had happened to them, that there were dangers ahead. And eventually he got the hell out of the mix. So we've got a unique opportunity this evening to ask questions from someone who's been there, who's rubbed shoulders with these people, who's been to awards ceremonies, he's acted with the biggest names in Hollywood, he's been to after parties. You've got a unique opportunity to draw upon Matthew's experience. And if you want to draw upon hours and hours of his content, and you'll get to see his lovely dog, go and subscribe to his channel. All of Matthew's links are in the description box below this video. We did 30 minutes with him about a year ago, and it wasn't enough. And the viewers ever since have been asking, come on, Shaun, let's get Matthew back on. So huge thank you for coming back on, my friend.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Back by popular demand, right? Is that how it is?
Indeed, yes. And then some, because this Diddy case has magnified interest in what's really going on in Hollywood and at the top of music, because it seems that all these people that people have worshipped for so many years, decades, that their backstories are completely fake.
Yeah.
But not only that, a lot of them are doing really evil stuff, or they've had evil stuff done to them. They've been compromised to get to where they are. But before we go to all that stuff, a lot of people haven't seen the first 30 minutes that we did with you, Matthew, a year or so ago. We've got a lot more subscribers now. Let's just slowly reintroduce yourself, and tell them about how you grew up, where you grew up, and all the slog you had to do.
All right. Well, it's a bit of a nightmare when you say to an actor, "Go talk about yourself." I'm like, you asked for it. You asked for it. All right. So I was raised in, as you will be familiar with, a working class background in the UK on a council estate, as they, I guess the closest you could get to it in the USA would be like the projects, I think. So I grew up. I always say I grew up in Mordor, right, which is where the Black Country in the Midlands, which is where Tolkien based Mordor on. Grew up there, single parent. Always dreamt of bigger things. I think, my head was in the clouds a little bit. And as it turned out, I was pretty good at memorizing things. And, lucky for me, I was pretty good at acting. So I got myself into the National Youth Theatre when I was around 14, 15 years old, which is kind of like, the premier youth theatre in the world. And that kind of like helped open a few doors for me. Went on and I got I went to do a degree in performing arts at Middlesex University. And in the meantime, I managed to get myself an agent. And then the first job I ever did was Emmerdale, which is, it was probably the third biggest show on television back then. Left there after a few months and eventually got into a show called Coronation Street. After Coronation Street, or while I was in Coronation Street, I won the Best Newcomer Award at National Television Awards, which was awesome. But I always wanted to test myself in the United States, right? You always kind of like want to push yourself to be as good as you can be. And I never really saw myself as, should I say I saw myself as an actor rather than like someone who is a soap star. So after 1 year, getting the award, I had a little bit of a music career. What a lot of people don't realize, Shaun, is that I was actually offered a recording deal before I was even in Coronation Street or before I was in Emmerdale, but I turned it down. And so I did that for a little while. And then after a year or so, I went back into acting, and I did a movie with Michael Caine. And that really blew things up for me, because he was up for an Oscar in Cider House Rules. And so everyone was like, who's this kid? You know, kid back then, you know, I was 26, I think. You know, there was this kid acting with Michael Caine. And then a couple of managers flew over to see me in London. And I signed with one and went over. And then the first movie I got was Black Hawk Down. So I was like, why didn't I go earlier? But yeah, so I did that, and then got signed by the biggest agent in Hollywood. I was at CAA, who are they're the most powerful agents over there, and started having a career, you know, and it was one of those ones where it was a real magical time when I first went, you know, like it was almost like, you know, the streets were paved with gold. I was testing for different things. I tested for Superman, tested for all these like massive roles. And as time went by, I kind of started noticing the way that people would speak, because I think back then a lot of people were kind of apolitical. They weren't really, you know, as rabid as they are now. You know, if you went over there, you could just get on with life. People would say, hey, listen, if you work hard, you know, you can achieve whatever you want to. And I look back and think that the real inspiration for me, Shaun, was Rocky back in the day, because I'm like, you know what, coming from a working class background, I didn't have the opportunities I think that a lot of people did, but I was like, if I can work hard enough and outwork other people, and that's been my whole thing, my mantra through my whole life, is that, you know, whatever I lack in talent or ability, I'll make up for it with hard work. And then, you know, 20 odd years later, I saved Stallone's life in Rambo. And so that was, it's been quite amazing. But I did see a turn. You know, there was a rather nasty article written about me just because I went to a meeting to raise money for family-friendly movies. And then I was like, hang on a second, what is going on here? Like, why these people that I'm with, as I got more kind of like politically savvy, I was like, hang on a second, like, you can't come out and talk about anything other than what they want to talk about, right? Or you get shut down. And I started seeing it behind the scenes, how nasty people were, how they would talk about other people, certainly like as what they termed as the flyover states. And I really hated that. I really hated that kind of diminishing, because those are my people, right? Like, my grandmother was clean toilets for a living. My mom was a cleaner, you know, from very, very modest background. And I looked, I'm like, hang on a second, you're talking about my people. I never saw myself as part of Hollywood. I always saw myself as someone, again, that was just acting. I was just doing my job. And then, as you said, you know, I started seeing a few things. I'm like, hang on a minute. And you kind of conditioned, I think, through the process to think that it's normal, the way that they behave. And I was always like, hang on a minute. No, that's pushing against me. And as I kind of like grew up, I guess, I started going, hang on a second. No, I'm not accepting this. I'm not accepting the way that you're talking about people. I'm not accepting these roles that are coming to me, that you're telling me that are good for my career. And as you said, you know, I started like extracting myself from those situations. And when you start saying, no, I'm not doing this, all of a sudden you're outside of the bubble, right? Like, you're not playing game, and they don't like that. And so the natural progression for them is to ostracize you and push you out. And that's what happened.
That's a great intro, Matthew. Appreciate that. Let's go over this all more slowly, and we'll go back to what you said at the very beginning. Then, you know, you're coming from this area of the UK where it's the grind, isn't it? So, getting into drama, then, were you picked on by the Council Estate ruffians?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, you know, it's a natural progression, right? You're from a working class background. You know, the funny thing is I always wanted to do it. And I think that a lot of my friends actually went off and did other jobs. Like, one of my closest friends I've been friends with for years and years and years, he ended up in the army. He's a Grenadier Guard. And other people got into trouble, you know what I mean? And I kind of like, just, I don't know why. It was kind of weird. Like I said, I had this, like, I was very myopic with what I wanted to do. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm at least going to give it my best shot. And so, I mean, I did the first cover of a magazine when I was 16 years old. I did just 17, and someone put me in for a modeling competition back then, and I was like, okay, and I managed to become a finalist in it. So I knew that I was going to move down to London, and then a year later, I did the clothes show. Again, it was another modeling competition, and I was 17, and I was the youngest person there. And I moved down to London then. So, I mean, I was mercilessly mocked, and told constantly that I wouldn't do it, that I wouldn't make it, that, I remember I worked as a butcher's in the indoor market in West Bromwich, and every single day that I worked there, they would take the mickey out of me. And then it was funny because years later, someone came up to me and they were like, hey, this guy was a butcher you used to work for. You're good friends with him, right? I mean, the guys that mocked me every day. Yeah, like, and I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I understand, when you say you're going to go for something that's kind of like outlandish and something that most people never achieve, and that's why it kind of hardens you. So, when I get criticized now, it's just like I have rhino thick skin. It doesn't really bother me at all. Because, as when you come from nothing and you achieve something, you're not I mean, I don't want to go back to it, but I'm in the zone. You know what I mean? Like the fact that I'm living in America, the fact that I've done what I've done, I'm already batting 1,000 for what I ever thought of myself. And I think that if you don't believe it, if you don't believe the BS, then it really grounds you. So I've always got that to go back to. And what's really great is when I go back home and I see my people, they know that I haven't changed, right? It hasn't changed me in any way, shape, or form going on these things. And I think that, whether money or fame, people say, well, does it change people? And I don't think it does. I think what it does is it amplifies whether they're assholes or not. Do you know what I mean? They're just given permission to be more like that because people don't want to tell them no. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right, so we've got almost 2,500 watching live right now, and we've actor Matthew Marsden. And if you missed the beginning, he went from Coronation Street to Black Hawk Down and Rambo, just to name drop a few. I'm going to put all of his links in the chat. We've got Twitter, we've got YouTube, we've got Instagram. They're also in the description box below this video. So please support Matthew's work. Please subscribe to his channel. He's doing tons of content over there on his YouTube, really long live streams, etc. And you get to see his lovely dog as well. Also, please put questions in the chat so that we can get them to him. We've got him for about an hour, so there's about another 45 minutes. I know we've already got about a dozen questions in already, but keep them coming in, and I'll keep logging them here, and we will work our way through them eventually. Now, there's a pertinent comment here before we get to the Hollywood stuff from Suzab Moore. Love the guests you have. Sure, this is going to worry a lot of parents letting their children into the business, scary stuff. So you said you got into the business, like modeling, just 17, whatever it was, at a record young age, and moved to London at this age. Yeah, when you're older, you realize the dangers and saw the vulnerabilities. But at that age, did you feel vulnerable, or were you just so excited to be going down that path?
Yeah, I mean, I look back and I'm like, what? You know what I mean? Like how I managed to navigate through it, it was just pure luck. It wasn't any kind of savvy. I think I was a little bit naive back then, and maybe, I mean, I'm a big guy, right? So I feel that perhaps that saved me from being taken advantage of, because when you're physically a little bit bigger, then people tend to go, "Oh, you know, I'm not going to go there with that person." But I also think, you know, it's, you know, we start sounding like old farts, Shaun, but it was a different time. You know, I think that it was a lot more innocent. Although I did certainly miss a few, I dodge a few bullets, you know what I mean, back then. And certainly as I went through my career, I did, you know, and I
Right,
knew when
stop,
I was,
stop. You got to describe the bullets you dodged back then, please.
well, I think it's like, you know, when someone says, "Hey," you know, certainly when you're doing modeling, like, you should take that off, or do this, or, you know, can you come and do a shoot here, or can you come and you know, for hook or crook, by hook or crook, you know, somehow I kind of navigated through it. And I certainly think,
Where were you then when that person said that to you? Will you take this off?
well, I think that you know, when, I mean, it happened quite a bit when you're on a photo shoot. You know, it's because sometimes you do like test shoots as well, which is where you wanted to get pictures for your portfolio. Because you gotta remember, Shaun, I had no way of funding myself. You know, I couldn't go to my mom, so I had to go out and I had to earn. And because I had the opportunity to earn doing modeling, I'm like, well, why wouldn't I do that? You know, why wouldn't I go and do that? And I did other things as well, but, you know, I mean, the main thing for me was go off, do a modeling job, and mainly the modeling that I did was in, for example, in Turkey doing a commercial because of my acting background. So I remember I'd go into auditions, and people go, "Oh," when I'd walk in, because I was an actor that was modeling rather than a model that was acting. So I did a lot of that. But yeah, no, I mean, I'd be asked, can you wear this, or would you mind taking that off, or, you know, do you want to do this shoot? You know, I'm doing a shoot here. You want to come around to my house later and do the shoot? And you'd be like, no, no. But a lot of times, I think that we were, in those instances, actually protected by our agents back then, because they would tell you, like, do not do that. You know, you are not doing that. And there was a protocol, you know, where it was more of that, like, they would say, because if you think about money, right, like, as far as where money was concerned, they always wanted you to go through them. Your agents always wanted you to go through them so they could monitor what was going on. And I think, like, in hindsight, for me, I was very, like, a very straight-laced person. So I'd say, no, you got to go through my agent. And that continued through as an actor as well. I'd never kind of like moonlight. I was very much like, if my agent is putting me up for jobs, you got to speak to my agent. You know what I mean? So I think that kind of helped me. I did get offered, you know, a couple of times, like, there are people that are like, "Oh, I'm going to mentor you," and all that. And as a young boy that didn't have a dad, you kind of be like, okay, you know, you'd look for that father figure, and very often, um, I think that in hindsight, looking back, that wasn't their intention, but I still managed to get away with it. And I don't know if it's because I was very kind of innocent, and they were like, "Oh, well, no, I can't take advantage of this person." And also, I would have punched them in the face if they did. So there is that, you know what I mean?
You're getting asked to remind the viewers how old you were when you're doing that modeling and what years that was.
So the first cover I did was just 17, and I was 16 years old. So that would have been, let me do some math, like 89. Is that right? Because I was 73. So, and then
Yep.
I did Clothes Show in 1990. And when I moved down to London, it was with one of the finalists there. It's a guy called Martin Galley. And it was really funny because we stayed at his friend's house. For some reason, they weren't there at the apartment. I don't know why. And I can remember, Shaun, I had to wash it. It was in London, in New Cross, and the apartment was so small, I could sit on the toilet and put my feet in the shower. And when you had to wash your hands, you had to do it one hand at a time, because the bowl was literally like yay big, and it had a tap on the corner, and it only had cold water. So it was funny, but I had Martin there, and we would go around to all the